It's finally here. The Mig-23MLD has been added to War Thunder. Let's check out this amazing machine. First up, if you're interested in a lot more of the history and context about the Mig-23 generally, you should go check out my video review of the Mig-23M from when it first came out a few months ago. I'll put a link in the description. It's a detailed review, not a quick review, so it's a bit longer, and I go a lot deeper into the history and role of the Mig-23 generally. In this review, I'm going to focus more on the MLD variant specifically. The MiG-23 itself first entered service in 1970 as a dedicated interceptor. It quickly became apparent that its capabilities as a close-in fighter weren't going to be competitive with the new generation of Western aircraft expected to enter service in the mid to late 1970s, so the Soviets set about a series of progressive upgrades to the basic 23 design, which eventually culminated in what we have here, the MLD variant, which was the final production version of the MiG-23 and served as a dedicated dogfighter version of the plane. The MLD was significantly modified from the original design, internally and externally. On the outside, there were a handful of aerodynamic refinements, including the most noticeable feature being that the wing root leading edges now have a sawtooth notch instead of being tapered into the fuselage. This generates vortices over the top of the fuselage and increased the maneuverability quite a bit. The manufacturer claims over 20%. Internally, the MLD saw dramatic changes, with fuel tanks being moved around, structural elements modified and strengthened to increase G-force tolerances and shift the center of gravity, and a fourth wing sweep position was added, although the fourth wing sweep angle of 33 degrees was rarely used in practice. These changes resulted in an aircraft which looked visually similar at a quick glance, but had completely different performance from the earlier MiG-23 models. Among the major modifications, the weapon system and electronics were upgraded as well. The MiG-23 MLD carries an upgraded version of the Sapphire 23 radar set, which adds to the capabilities of the radar on the MiG-23M. It has the same advanced moving target indication and look-down modes, IFF and ACM boresight modes that the MiG-23 had. On paper, the radar on the MLD is slightly better in range and resistance to countermeasures and ground clutter, but in War Thunder, I'll say bluntly that I only noticed one difference. The ACM boresight mode is a true dogfighting boresight on the MLD, which is stretched vertically to allow you to lock up a target you're pulling into a turn on. How useful this is in practice will depend on your playstyle, but it's an upgrade all the same, focused on dogfighting capability. In terms of weapons, the MiG-23 MLD punches hard. There are a huge selection of loadouts with a various combination of weapons, but I'll say right here that the unguided rockets and bombs are basically useless after you've grinded out the second tier of air-to-air missiles. The base missile you get is the familiar R3S, which kinda sucks, but you knew that. You quickly upgrade to the R13M1 and the R60, which are both very good weapons. On the wing root pylons, you can carry several versions of the Apex missile, the first being the same R-23 missile that the MiG-23M gets, in both infrared and semi-active radar versions. The real star of the show, though, is the R-24. This is an upgraded version of the R-23, and again, you get infrared and semi-active radar versions of the missile. The R-24 is an upgrade in literally every way. It's faster, has longer range, pulls better, seeks better, and both versions have shorter minimum engagement ranges. In short, you're gonna love these things. Now, there are two technical gripes I have, and one of them is carried over from the MiG-23M. First, the R-24R semi-active radar missile has a lock-on after launch capability in real life. This means that the missile can be fired in the general direction of the target without a radar lock, and the launching plane could lock onto the target a few seconds later in order to reduce the response time of the target aircraft. Second, like the Mig-23M, the practice with the MLD was to carry one radar-guided and one infrared-guided R-24. In War Thunder, none of the loadouts let you do this, and both of your long-range weapons have to be the same type. Also, the R-24 does not have the lock-on after launch capability. Grumble, 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 grumble. Anyway, though, now, in terms of flight performance, forget everything you thought you knew about the MiG-23. If flown properly with an upgraded crew, you can dance on stuff like MiG-21s and every version of the F-4 that's currently in the game. In one of the clips here, I was able to outmaneuver a MiG-21 Beast in a close-in turn fight. Remember how I mentioned the MLD had upgraded dogfighting maneuverability? Yeah, I wasn't kidding around. You're going to surprise the hell out of some people with this plane, and its turn performance is significantly better than the Mig-21M at every speed and altitude. You can even hang in slow crawl turn fights at low speeds with this thing without even trying very hard. In flying this plane out to get footage for this review, the only times I got shot down in this thing were engagements against multiple opponents or head-on trades. I didn't get shot down even once in one-on-one dogfights, and remember, I'm only an average pilot in War Thunder. The engine performance is also upgraded from the Mig-23M. You can hit Mach 1.12 or higher down on the deck without even noticing. The climb performance is also just crazy. The one thing you need to keep in mind, at supersonic speeds above Mach 1, aircraft are, generally speaking, significantly less maneuverable. You might find yourself thinking that the Mig-23MLD feels sluggish in some high-speed turns, but the answer really is just to slow down a little bit. Once you get below Mach 0.95, things get real. Also, the Mig-23MLD is, quite obviously, a variable geometry aircraft. You can manually control the wing sweep, just like with the 23M and the Su-17, but to be honest, I'm going to suggest leaving it on automatic except for landing. The reason is, the wing sweep mechanism isn't instantaneous, and in order to be effective with manual control in a fight, you have to think 3 or 4 seconds ahead, and you only gain a tiny fractional performance advantage over the automated sweep control, which, in my opinion, isn't worth the extra hassle. Just leave it on automatic, it's one less thing to worry about. Now, when you go to fly the Mig-23MLD out into missions, you have to break some bad habits. Your instinct might be to fly this thing like the Mig-23M, but you don't need to be so reserved in air combat. You're not locked into a vulture playstyle or no-circle fight tactics. With the MLD, you can reliably perform just about any attack profile you want, with a little practice. Radar locks can still be a little weird. For whatever reason, radar systems in War Thunder seem to be allergic to enemy targets anytime there's a friendly AI-controlled plane in range that it can lock onto, but once you get the feel for operating the weapon system and using the bore sight mode and the infrared search and track and all that, you're going to have a really good time flying this plane out in basically any mission profile you want. A quick note though, I didn't fly this plane out as close air support and ground RB at all. It doesn't have a ballistics computer for any of its air-to-ground weapons, and its weapon load is simply too light for effective close air support anyway, so just stick to air combat with this one. Another quick note, the MLD has additional countermeasures dispensers. The way these work is that your top dispensers will empty first, and then your bottom dispensers will activate. Keep track of this, since it's important to keep in mind where your flares and chaff are going to be ejecting from when you pop them out in the middle of a fight. The landing performance of the Mig-23MLD is basically the same as the 23M. Use the manual wing sweep with the air brakes, and landing shouldn't be any issue. After all, the entire point of the variable geometry setup was to provide good landing performance at the same time as good high-speed performance. You get a drag chute too, so really the landing run shouldn't be too bad. Visually, the MLD is pretty slick. But you only get 2 skins, and the second one is basically just identical with some nose art. kind of a letdown, but we'll see what comes out for player-made skins. The 3D model is outstanding, though, and, the detail is just great. This plane's wonderful to look at. The cockpit in the MLD is really good, with one exception. You still have that annoying structural brace directly above the pilot's head. This makes flying the MLD with a VR headset really annoying, and it's going to dramatically handicap your dogfight visibility. Another important note here, the Mig-23MLD and some other Soviet jets from the era display the radar scope transposed on the heads-up display. If you were wondering why there wasn't a PPI in the cockpit dashboard, that's why. It's out on the HUD. This can take a little while to get used to, but once you figure it out, you'll probably like it. To close out the Mig-23MLD, this plane has a capable radar system with a very strong selection of high-performance air-to-air missiles. In fact, the R-24T is probably the best missile in the game right now. This plane can actually dogfight, has amazing engine performance, and has an adequate amount of countermeasures. However, no combat flaps, and the in-game weapon loadouts won't let you do the infrared semi-active radar combo 1-for-1 that was used in real life. The final verdict on the Mig-23MLD is, quite simply, as of its release today, this is the new boss dog. Give it the respect it deserves. As always, thanks for watching.